Hi, and welcome to the Selling in the Motor Trade podcast in association with CarWow, the online car-changing destination. Together, we share tips and ideas on how to sell more cars, improve your service department, and generally put more profit into your department, dealership, or dealer group. I'm your host, Simon Bowkett, or some of you might already know me as Skippy. Firstly, I just want to say thank you for taking the time to listen to this podcast. Hi, and welcome to another episode of Selling in the Motor Trade. Today, I'm joined by Estelle Miller. Now, Estelle runs EV Experts. I'm really excited to talk about everything electric from a used car perspective, because Estelle and her husband, Martin, have run EV Experts, and I just want to see from the floor, from the ground, exactly what it's like retailing electric vehicles and used electric vehicles in the modern motor trade at the moment. So welcome aboard, Estelle.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Listen, before we start, can you tell us a little bit about your background? How did you start in the motor trade?
So in 2016, we decided to reduce our carbon footprint. And one of the things we wanted to do was switch to an electric car. My husband, Martin, is an early adopter, sort of techie type person. So he was keen, and I was working for a charity at the time. My background is actually sort of corporate law and governance, and I was working for an environmental charity, and we were looking at the circular economy. We were looking at a number of things, and one of the companies that we were working with at that time was Renault, who'd obviously launched the Renault Zoe. So we set off in 2016, thinking, let's go for it. We would want to buy used. I often buy used, not just cars, but I buy used clothes. I buy, I like the whole circular economy thing. You know, why make something new if there's something where the energy's already been expended to produce something, and let's get that. So anyway, it was really dark, really, really hard. Couldn't really find people selling secondhand electric cars. Even going to the dealerships, you know, they didn't know a lot about them, were reluctant to dig them out. If they did dig them out, they didn't have any charge, so you couldn't test drive them. And it was just a really difficult experience. And it hit home that they're just not going to take off unless there's a really decent place where you can buy pre-owned. And, you know, that's going to affect new residuals if there isn't a decent pre-owned market. And so my partner, my husband at that time, was between jobs, and he has a marketing background. And I'd actually taken some time out, sadly, to support a family member who'd been diagnosed with a terminal cancer, and was then returning to the workplace and had a bit of capital, and thought it would be a brilliant idea to set up a used EV independent specialist dealership. So that's what we did. And initially we were based at home for the first, so we set it up in May 2017, and we were at home for the first sort of 6-7 months, but actually it just took off even in those early years, and it was too much to run from home. So we secured premises in Guildford on the A3 southbound. It used to be a petrol station. We quite like the irony of that.
Okay.
Yeah, and we've been there ever since. And then we opened a second site in 2022 in Hampshire, and we're still here. The team's grown, the number of cars on the forecourt has grown, and the type of customer has grown too. And that's been an interesting part of it. So in the beginning, we were selling to a lot of early adopters, really, techie people. They needed a lot of information. They were very particular about their spec and about the condition of the car. Whereas now we're seeing early majority, and their requirements are a bit more practical. They need a bit more assistance and support on that EV journey in terms of where they're going to charge, how they're going to charge.
Okay, so most of the time we speak to people, they're motor traders all their life. They worked in a traditional car dealership. So you've gone straight in, not being a motor trader. I love the idea of that. You just said, let's go for it. From marketing with Martin and yourself in the law background as well. How do you find when you first set up the dealership? There must have been some challenges there.
Yeah, it was a bit of a learning curve. I mean, Martin did have some car background, not dealership background. So he
Mm-hmm.
worked on the advertising side
Mm-hmm.
for both Ford and Peugeot. So, and is just like, he was a complete petrol head, complete car nut. So knew a lot about cars. So in terms of information about how to talk to customers, how to present yourself, we had a bit of a head start, I guess, on that. We sell cars in this way that we would like to purchase cars. So it's kind of a consultative experience. We listen to what the customers want. We are very we go from what the customer's looking for rather than trying to sell what we want to sell off the forecourt because we've been looking at it too long. So it's kind of a different conversation, I think, to the traditional conversation. There is a lot of chat about how to charge and other things that are nothing to do with the actual model that people are buying. And inevitably, in a lot of our conversations, we end up sourcing a car for someone rather than selling the thing that's in front of them.
Okay.
So yeah, it is a bit different, but it was steep. And I don't know if I'm allowed to shout out, but also,
Of course you are.
so we Auto Trader run, like seminars and information and webinars that were really helpful in those early days. And some of them were in person because obviously it was way pre-COVID. So and they were really helpful, really great. And in fact, to repay that, we have participated in Auto Trader's tutorials about selling EVs. Because it is a bit different.
Can you tell me about your experience when you tried to buy a Zoe? So you and Martin, did you go to a franchise dealership and look for used cars there? I know it's going back to 2017, but what was the experience like?
So, so we started with the Zoe, and we went to 3 different Renault dealerships. 1 to look at a new Zoe, and 2 to look at used that they had in. And in 1, as I said, they couldn't we got there and they said we still can't get it started. So we can't even bring it round. It's round the back. It won't move. Would you like to buy a Clio? And the second one, it was, you don't want a Zoe and we don't even have one. Would you like to buy a Clio?
So why did they decide you didn't want a Zoe? Because you decided, I want to go green. I want secondhand. I like the whole recycling idea, but they decided you didn't want a Zoe. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly right. And so we then decided maybe we would get an i3. We had a slightly better experience from BMW dealerships and a specialist. And and that's actually in the end what we bought. And then shortly after that, we bought a Nissan Leaf, obviously a little battery, 24 kilowatt Nissan Leaf, again from a Nissan dealership, but used. And that actually was a really good experience in the end. It was just really hard persuading the salesperson that that's what we wanted. We don't want to go electric. It's going to be a nightmare, we won't be able to charge anywhere. And I mean, to be honest, back then, people moan about the infrastructure now. Oh my word. They want to try get it, but we would buy cars. We bought a car near borders in Scotland.
Yes.
It was a 22 kilowatt Zoe, and we had to charge and we had to drive it down. 5 very long stops. So to us now, the infrastructure I think is pretty good now. I zip around the country rarely with difficulties. It was. I think it was that people the salesman had never driven them themselves. So you'd get in and they'd be like, "Oh, I've not actually been in it yet."
Is it started? It's not making noises. Yeah. Well, I tell you what, I was working with Nissan dealerships at the time with the Leaf. So the Leaf was really right at the beginning of the EV in the UK, anyway. And I can remember at the time. Nissan themselves said, you've got to register these cars no matter what, because we can't sell them. Okay. I can't remember what the government grant was at the time, but it was significant. And they still couldn't sell them. And I tell you what, it's I don't think Jeremy Clarkson helped, because I can remember at the time. Do you remember this, Estelle? He drove up to the north and this Leaf ran out of power, and I'm sure it's all for entertainment. I'm sure there was a lots of exaggeration in there, but what was that, 10 years ago? No, it'd be 15 years ago, I think, something like that.
So a Nissan Leaf was 2011. So
Yeah, wow, that was the time.
yeah.
And then again, I remember driving the first, goodness me, I'm showing my age now, but thinking it's going to be a golf cart. And even the Leaf, you had this all the time. Wow, they have some torque. Wow, they have some acceleration.
Mm.
It was, and
Absolutely. And this is the thing that I found a bit frustrating, actually, because in all the media noise, particularly over the last 18 months, 2 years, this whole, are they environmentally friendly? Are they cheaper to run? The noise around those two issues has completely drowned out that they're actually really good fun to drive. They're
yes.
actually a really good driving experience. They are easy to drive.
Mhm,
A lot of them, they're smooth.
mhm.
We saw some research that a university did that suggested that they are better if you suffer from travel sickness. They're better for dogs if they suffer from travel sickness. So yeah, I mean, honestly, they're great to drive. But I particularly like cars, the EVs that do single pedal driving.
Mhm.
So the i3 obviously did that right from the start. The Nissan Leaf didn't bring that in until 2018 when they relaunched the second gen. And I mean, I'm a real Nissan Leaf girl. I mean, I can understand that they've decided not to kind of bring out a third reiteration
Mm.
of it, perhaps CCS rapid charges.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm going to miss my Nissan Leaf. I loved it.
I,
Um, yeah.
again, the single foot driving, I don't know if that separates us real motor traders with petrol in our bloods. Because I started when I was 17, and it's again the driving. I never put it in the braking mode. I put it in the drive mode, but then my son is always in the single foot braking mode, and I wonder if that's just what we're used to. I don't know. We as humans, we don't like change, do we?
Yeah, I mean, I think that is part of the problem here about the switch to EVs, and that's why us as dealers, really have a responsibility to help people understand what it is and to reassure them and guide them through that journey because. You start obviously with a resistance to change. I think that, as you say, is a natural state for us humans, and to have people who can. I mean, for example, with technology, it's a standing joke, but we all rely on our kids, don't we, to
Yes, yes.
through understanding how to use the next phone, how to use, I don't know, Snapchat and Instagram. So we rely on our children to navigate us through those developments, even Ringo parking apps, etc. But
Mhm.
obviously we can't rely on our children to help us with a car because they
Yes.
don't drive yet. And of course, even young drivers, because EVs are so quick and high horsepower, they are expensive for new drivers to
Mhm.
be insured on. And
Yes.
so, even if you've got a young driver in your household, the chances are they're not going to be an electric car yet. Until they've got a few years no claims behind them,
Mhm.
and perhaps over 21 or 23 years old. So
Yeah.
so yeah, we can't rely on our kids anymore to explain it to us. We need the people we're buying the cars from to take us through on that journey and just explain how it works. And this is one of the things that we did right from the start. Obviously, myself and Martin were the sales team when we
Mhm.
first launched our business. But as we grew, we've taken on sales people. Again, not from motor trade.
Mhm.
They do have retail backgrounds, but not motor trade. But one of the requirements of the job is that they commute in stock cars.
Yes. Yeah.
So they are driving an electric car every day. And because we're an independent specialist as well, remember, we can sell, the cars of 20 different manufacturers, and some of those manufacturers have several models. So the other thing as well is, we're EV experts. I'm not necessarily an expert on the seventh menu in, a Kia, for example.
Yes. Yeah.
But we need at least a passable understanding and knowledge of each individual car. So it's really important to us that our customers, get a great experience. And so we do get the salespeople to drive those cars every single day.
Now, I know you're a used car operation. I'm going to talk lots about used cars, and I want to get your view on residual values, used cars, where they're going. But before I do that, because you're at the sharp end, speaking to customers day in, day out. I want to talk about this new cars. 28% of cars next year have to be zero emission cars. Okay. And I just want to get your view are we going to make it? Because electric vehicles to start with, there are lots of incentives, zero tax, cheap electricity. The pay-per-mile charging system, we know the government has to change that. If everyone goes electric, which is going to happen, or sorry, zero emissions, I should say, they need to get revenue from somewhere to fix the potholes in the roads, definitely around where I live. So I want to ask you, is the pay-per-mile charge, is it hindering the adoption of electric vehicles for customers? Are customers concerned about that?
Well, the Conservative government 2 years ago already announced that electric cars would start paying road tax from April 2025 at the standard rate, unless they were older than 2017, in which case they're that £20 cheaper rate. So that's already accepted, and a lot of people are aware of that. It's been a long time coming, and there's been a lot of publication and media about that. So I don't think that bringing in paper mile is, going to make much to hinder the switch to electric. I mean, it might help make people look at how they transport themselves from A to B and decide that perhaps they could use other forms of transport that perhaps, are more environmentally friendly, not just, public transport, for example, cycling. And I can see that the government wants to encourage that. But then equally, I mean, we're all moaning about the state of the roads, UK roads. There's definitely been a deterioration over the last decade.
Yes.
And yes, something's got to pay for that. So I'm not sure that that's really going to hinder. And I'm going to perhaps slightly controversially say that I don't feel that switching to EV should be incentivized by EV drivers not paying road tax. I've never been in that sort of thought. But there are other things that I think the government should do. As an example, if you charge your car at home, then the VAT you pay on your electricity is 5%. If you charge your car publicly, then the VAT you pay on your electricity is 20%. That, to me, that just doesn't make sense. It's not fair. It penalizes people who are unable to charge at home. And something as simple as that, I think, would be a really positive step of the government. There's just no reason to continue with that disparity, and I think that sort of thing should be encouraged by the government to incentivize, because those things are still barriers. People are like, hang on a minute, the public charging is really expensive. It's a barrier, and the government needs to perhaps take down those barriers, because ultimately the whole point of switching to electric cars is to reduce emissions, because emissions are so harmful, and the number of child deaths that there are every year, the amount of money that we spend through the NHS on supporting people who have respiratory problems that are caused by emissions. So, electric cars aside, we need to reduce the emissions that we make into our environment. And electric cars are a great way to do that. As a society, and the government needs to support that transition.
Yeah, I want to get your views now then on hybrid technology. I know we spoke before this, and I think we have a similar views on hybrid technology. There'll be a lot of people think, well, it's a logical step. If they're going from internal combustion, diesel or petrol, their range is not quite right yet. So maybe hybrid's the logical step for them. And next cycle, they'll go full EV. And of course, there's different self-charging hybrids. There's plug-in hybrids. What's your view on the hybrids? I can say people are listening to this. You should have just seen the look on Estelle's face when I said that. Most people listen to this podcast. So I think I've opened a can of worms.
Yeah, brace yourself. Okay. So let me try and be calm. So I have a number of thoughts. We have a number of thoughts about hybrids. They are quite probably the worst of both worlds. I think that's the start. Lots of people say they're the best of both worlds. They're not the best of both worlds, because you end up with a vehicle that's going to be significantly heavier. It's carrying a petrol system as well as an EV system. They usually do so few EV electric miles that it's just pointless. When I say so few, I mean literally sort of 12 to 15 miles, electric miles you'll get out of it. So you're going to have to plug in every day. If you can't charge at home, that's going to be extremely inconvenient. And what do you get? 12 to 15 electric miles. It seems bonkers to me. I'm going to be honest. I can see.
And then you're carrying around a big, heavy battery.
Yeah,
and it makes it worse fuel consumption. Yeah.
Exactly. And also because of size constraints, they tend to have smaller petrol engines in there. So then when you're trying to get performance out of the car, they underperform, or you're pushing that petrol engine to the maximum that it's able to give all the time. So you're working that petrol engine really hard, and that's not great for it or for your pocket, because ultimately they are very complex machines. They are going to be expensive to maintain and service and keep on the road. And and I can see why manufacturers quite like that, because obviously it's ongoing revenue for service centres. And I can see why manufacturers are turning to this slightly in desperation, because there's been so little support for consumers to making the full switch to EVs. So they're like, okay, well, maybe we need to provide hybrids then, so at least they buy something. So yeah, I think it's a real shame. Now, having said that, there are use cases. I completely get it that there are some people out there who do a lot of miles. They perhaps can't charge at home. So I think there are some slightly niche use cases where a hybrid is perhaps required or helpful. And I think if the government decides to allow the sale of hybrids, beyond 2030, into that could help, those people who are in that scenario. But, quite frankly, nowadays, for £15,000, you can buy a car that will comfortably do 150 to 170 miles of range. Most people don't even do that in a week. And I think it's 60% of households have driveways or the ability to charge either at home or at work. And also, if you're only needing to charge once a week, well, if you need to do that publicly, that's also not necessarily that big a deal, because it's something you're only doing once a week. I mean, back in the day, I used to drive to a petrol station once a week to fill up with petrol. So, if you've got somewhere that's around the corner from your home and you can drive there, plug it in once a week, wander back, or, there are ways that can happen. So, unless you have a really unusual setup and use case, I would say, there's no reason to have a leapfrog in between. You might as well just go full electric, enjoy the great driving experience, enjoy the reduced maintenance and servicing costs, and and the fact that you are zero emissions.
Yeah, I'm looking at, I need to change my car at the moment. And I drive a 5 Series. I've had 3 5 Series because I'm a 25,000 mile a year person. And unfortunately, I work to London regularly, to Edinburgh, and it's one of those things. So I think it's education. So you look at the 530e, and seriously, they're saying I'll get 40 miles on plug-in, and then you're carrying around a big heavy battery, and it's education. So when you're on the motorway, that car just makes no sense at all. You are so much better either just saying, it's just not going to work for that trip at the moment. Change it around, because that hybrid is there is a lot of people I think have bought hybrid, maybe not now, education's getting out there, but bought the hybrid because they thought they're doing the right thing. They really did.
Yeah, and I do have sympathy with that. A couple of the manufacturers were pulled up for their advertising by the Advertising Standards Authority in the early days. For example, talking about a self-charging hybrid. It's not self-charging, you're charging a battery with petrol. And they had to change their advertising because it was deemed as misleading. Yeah, but again, it comes back to, you're right, having education and support at your point of purchase to really understand, what's going to work for you. And, 25, well, this is another thing which frustrates me. Now you've got me going. So motoring journalists have a really unusual use case. They do 25,000 miles a year. Yep. They are, and inevitably they've been a bit disappointed with their charging experiences or have had some frustrations. And then they go out there into the press with the whole electric cars are rubbish. And you're actually, what, electric cars are rubbish maybe if you do 3,000 miles a month. And maybe, the life of a journalist is tricky because, you don't know where you're going to be tomorrow because you will be where the story is. And that story might be 300 miles away. It might be 3 miles away. So I completely get it. And, quite frankly, if that is the use case, we say to people on our forecourt who come with these kind of problems or their budget doesn't get them a car that does enough range for their needs, we're just like, stick with petrol or diesel until there's an EV that works for you in your budget and with your lifestyle. And I don't think we should be afraid to say that. And so I do get a bit frustrated because that's what you're hearing in the media. And the reality is, if you look at MOT data, last year, I think it was around 6,000 miles a year was the average for cars. Now, obviously, I appreciate that there will be cars out there that are doing literally nothing and maybe getting an MOT and they're a tawdry error. And so I was looking at the data given by the Leasing Association, and that's pretty accurate because they've got cars where they're charging people extra mileage, and so they're monitoring mileage of all the cars on their fleets, and they're talking about sort of 7,500 miles being the average number of miles that an English person or someone in the UK does in a year. And so when you're starting to look at that, there really are a lot of people out there who could make the switch quite happily and would love it, and who definitely do not need a hybrid.
Well, I tell you, second-time adopters, that's quite a lovely figure I'd like to see. Early on in the Leaf days, so I'm going back right at the beginning, sure, there were people who went to the Leaf and went, this is not working for me yet, and going back to petrol diesel. But now I think it really has changed. I think it's changed lots. And even the press, I've got to say, it's 2024 now. I think there's as much strong press towards it. Again, if you want the petrol heads, strap yourself into a Taycan or one of these things, and you'll have all the fun in the world. You'll have acceleration times better than their 911s or whatever they have there. So I think it is changing now. Do you feel it's changing, speaking to consumers now?
Yes, I think it is. And I think it is as more people have driven them and start talking about having fun and enjoying the driving experience. There are also some, is it Hyundai that have brought out the N, and they're bringing in some noises and some more feedback for drivers. And I do get it. If you're a real driver and a real petrol head, you have less feedback through the steering wheel and through the car. It's not vibrating. It's, so and manufacturers are starting to address that. And there are already some things that are fun and give more on the market available. And the other thing as well is I think people are starting to be more flexible about how they transport themselves. So when we started up, actually, I was speaking to a journalist, and right then, we were driving car, all that was available was sort of 60, 70 miles of range, which is that can be a little bit squeaky on some days. It's not unusual.
It's quite funny how quick it's changed, though, hasn't it? When you say those numbers, I'm like, no, but it's like it has changed so quick. Yeah.
And 30 kilowatt battery for me was a bit of a game changer. So I was a mom and, doing the school run, doing, both of my kids, one of them was quite sporty. So he was would be
Mm.
playing rugby here, there, and everywhere. The other one was musical, and there would be, he's playing in an orchestra here or at a church there. And so, you're a bit all over the place. And there were days where I'm like, oh,
Oh.
6 miles left.
Oh,
So then when the 30 kilowatt Leaf came out, and I had 120 miles of range because I had one that was just 6 months old. So it was, in great shape. And that was a real game changer. And I found that there were so few days where I did more than 100 miles. So I was always looking at 20, 30, 40 miles of range left, which, makes you feel comfortable. But the other thing as well is that, I get people on the forecourt who are like, once a year we drive to Scotland, and so we need a car that's going to do like 600 miles. And I'm like, well, once a year we all
yeah.
have birthday parties or Christmas, and it would be great to own a minibus, but none of us own
Yeah.
a minibus all year round, because once a year, we want to get the family together in a quick and easy way. We find other solutions for those unusual journeys or unusual things that we want to do. And actually, maybe when you go to Scotland, you hire a car for that trip, or maybe you take the train, and
Have you heard what
hire a car.
Have you heard what Lexus is doing at the moment? Because they know the range on their, I think it's the, I'm not sure which one, but it's not the best. So they're saying, hey, for that, I think 4 times a year, you want to do a long trip, come in and we'll give you a petrol car to go and do the journey on. I thought that was quite different. So they've just said, yep, you know what? For the vast majority of times, you're going to be fine. Now,
Yeah.
I know we're talking about new cars, so I want to get into used cars now. But having said that, we do have this ZEV mandate, okay, and this year, next year it's going to be 28%. This year, there are lots of manufacturers that bought their way to that target because there was going to be a £15,000 fine. I think it's been well documented that Honda had their electric vehicle, was not selling at all until they threw the world at it, as in finance deposit contributions and deposits and extra bonus towards them. They sold it. Most dealers were selling on a PCP around the 200 a month, and they just bought the market. They've just got there. What effect? It's not just Honda. Lots of manufacturers have done that. Some people got there naturally, like BMW. They didn't have to worry about it. But what effect is that going to have on the residual values of these used cars? If the manufacturers keep doing that to get to that target, it's going to have a knock-on effect on in the residual used cars. Are they going to keep plummeting in price?
So I think, last year was a real roller coaster year. The year before, they were artificially high because of component shortages. So
Yes.
it's really difficult to get any kind of norm. But we have been looking at this. And I think where we're at right now is that once an EV gets to sort of 3 to 4 years old, it is then following the same depreciation path as its petrol or diesel equivalent. But on an EV, it's front loaded. So in that first 12 months, they're losing quite a lot, and significantly more than a petrol or diesel car. And then in the second and third years.
Do you have any data why that is? Is it because the manufacturer keeps up bringing newer, bigger batteries, better range? I liken it to the phone industry. You get a phone now that a 3-year-old iPhone's worth nothing. What's the difference between my 3-year-old iPhone and the one they just gave me a week ago? I can't really work out that much difference. But because is that what's happening? Do you think? Is there any data on that?
It's interesting. I haven't drilled down that much to be able to understand. I mean, I think it is because we're still at the point where new EVs are running about 20% more expensive than perhaps a petrol diesel. So the car is starting higher.
Okay.
And then when it comes into the used market, perhaps after a year or 2 years, it's then having to join, equivalents that may not be electric and will be petrol and diesel. And that market is requiring the car to be cheaper. So So yeah, so they are, and also actually, I think the other thing as well is that you've got a fair bit of oversupply because all of these new cars going out on, being pushed hard on new deals, you've then, used car pricing is all supply and demand. So if there are hundreds of basic spec red whatevers, which was the free color maybe, then there's loads of supply, and if the demand's not there, then the prices are just going to keep sliding until it gets to a point where people are willing to buy them. So that's been, I think there are some oversupply issues, and I definitely see it with basic models.
I suppose there will have to be oversupply issues if the EV mandate, they have to get 28% next year. But I can't see how they take that off. I don't think they can. It's one of the things the government did, previous government. They turned around and said to the public that, hold on, instead of 2030, we're now going to go to 2035. And I do think there's lots of people. My father-in-law at the time was, and no disrespect to him, I'm going to be in trouble here, but said, see, electric's not right. Okay, look, even the government said we're going back to 2035. My words, it'll be 2040 soon. But they never took the targets off the manufacturers.
No.
At all there. And that's why that I don't think it was the smartest thing for the government at the time to do that, because it just told the public that maybe this wasn't the route. I think that caused a lot of the issue there as well.
Yeah, I mean, it did, and it wasn't the smartest thing for helping people make the switch to EVs or for promoting EVs. I just think it was smart from his point of view because he wanted to get votes, and the votes that he was looking for were people who are, like, I don't want to switch my car, I don't want new technology, I don't believe that in climate change, those sorts of people. That's who he was appealing to, and that's what that announcement was designed to achieve. It didn't make any difference to the manufacturers because they still had the ZEV mandate that saw that switch happening in 2030, and that date and those targets weren't pushed back. And that's why it's easy for the Labour government to sort of bring it back forward again, because again, they're not really shifting anything because the manufacturers are all set up to do that already.
Yes. Well, that's the thing. A manufacturer takes, what is it, 7 years development on a car? It's not like what anyone does this week's going to affect what we're going to do next year. Now, having said that, Estelle, at the moment when we're recording this, the government's going to come out with a budget 2 weeks' time. So October budget. So if you listen to this after this, we have no idea what they're about to say. There's lots of rumours out there. But if Labor reintroduces a 2030 internal combustion engine, the whole ICE ban, I don't know if they're going to do that or not. What effect is that going to have, especially the traditional manufacturers?
Yeah, I think it's going to help because there are people out there who are just like, oh, I don't know what's going on. Should I, shouldn't I? And if a government says, no, it's happening, we're going to ban petrol and diesel cars, then there'll be people who are like, okay, fair enough. When I've next got to MOT my car or service my car, that's the point I want to make the switch, and I'm going to do it. It's going to take away that, oh, is it or isn't it the way we're going? So I think it would be really helpful just around the narrative, and that they did say in their manifesto that they're going to do that. So yeah, I mean, who knows?
Okay, so talking about the used car side of it, then I'm interested to see about the supply of used cars, getting used electric vehicles there. There was a situation where the price kept on sliding and sliding and sliding. You're telling me that they're starting to turn around now, getting used EVs. The market's stabilized. Is that fair to say?
It's definitely stabilized. And in fact, in the last couple of months, pricing cars are going well over cap. We're definitely seeing a real strengthening. I mean, they're not going up as quickly as they did in 2021 when we were seeing component shortages on the retail side, but certainly on the wholesale and trade side, those prices are climbing. and that will start filtering through to the forecourt soon.
Mm.
I mean, the budget, we're all waiting to see what happens in the budget.
Mm.
I think they don't even necessarily need to incentivize people to buy EVs. I think people just want the comfort to know that they are not going to be compromised by buying an EV. You know, they're genuinely, I've had people say to me, you know, I'm really worried that the government's going to decide to tax EVs, or, you know, not just road tax, you know,
Yes, yes.
you know, and you're just like, I don't understand where that's coming from. But people are afraid, of course.
Unknown again. It's the unknown.
It's the unknown, exactly. So, and as I said earlier, it's all about supply and demand. And if this budget is EV positive, or if it's, you know, for example, supposing they reduce the fuel duty discount on petrol, which, you know, would fill quite a big hole for the government. I think that costs them sort of £4 or £5 billion a year. Then there are lots of people who are like, you know what, I've had it with petrol. I'm not prepared to pay any more on that. I'm going to make the switch now. So, and we've seen that several times over the time, because we've been trading since 2017. We have seen times where fuel duty has changed, and we've also seen times where, you know, there were fuel shortages. And actually, one of the strangest things I had a lady pull. It was at that fuel shortage time, and I had a lady pull onto the forecourt. It was about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and she said, "Yeah, I've got no petrol in my car, and I am not queuing. I'm not doing this anymore. I've got a driveway, and I want an electric car. I have to leave here at 3:35 to pick my kids up from school.
Get me
I
one.
want an electric car by then." And you take the exchange. And she was so low on petrol. So, and you know, when you think, oh, she's just dramatic, it's not going to happen. She's on the phone. I don't care. Send them the money now. I need, and when I said, what do you need? What do you want? She goes, well, it's got to be 5 seats, and I've got a dog to go in the back. And it's whatever you've got that's got 100% charge, please. And she literally drove off with an electric car. I took the petrol, obviously, as a part exchange, and I did have to go to, you know, and get a cab
to put it in,
because it was that low. So yeah, I mean, people get very emotional about the price of petrol, and of course, it's a big part of our our domestic
budget. Oh yeah, it goes there. I suppose that was not the time to say, actually, it's best to charge it just to 80%. Okay, she wasn't in the mood to listen to that, was she?
No, she did not hear that.
I love that. I absolutely love that story. So listen, so we talk about the challenges of getting stock. So as a franchise dealership, we've got the trade-ins start coming through. I suppose you're having to go to auctions to find cars. Do you have independents? Do you underwrite cars? Do you have lots of other dealers say, so you're the expert on EVs, you sell lots of EVs. I imagine lots of people come to you for pricing on their trade-ins as well.
Yes, so well, we do sell. There are small family, you know, specialists and actually small family franchise dealerships as well that do sell their cars and look for underwrites, and we have great experiences with them and great relationships. And and whether I'm underwriting a car or not, you know, I'm always happy to share my thoughts. You know, so I do get people who phone me and say, you know, what should I be looking for? Is, you know, what kind of money? And even if you're not going to buy it, what can you just give me some pointers? Which, yeah, more than happy to do. But I do think it's a shame that, and as I said, I don't come from motor trade, so forgive my ignorance on how this has come about. But I do find it a shame and astonishing to see how many cars just go through auction, and it's not a great buying experience. I mean, obviously, an electric car, you don't need to hear it. So, but still not being able to really see the car, and paying that auction house all those fees. I just think it's a real shame that we've lost that human element where people deal with people and get cars underwritten and yeah, I would like to see way more of that than is currently obvious in the marketplace to myself.
Where do you stock your cars from? So, if someone listening to this thinking, I'm starting my own used car business, whatever, is it through auction? What percentage of your business comes through there? Are you having to go to on the BCA routes there, or do you look at Car Wow and their sourcing side of it? Do you look at motorways and We Buy Car? Well, not
Yeah.
We Buy Car, of course, that's going to go to BCA.
Yeah, so we do buy a fair bit from auction,
Mm,
just because of what I've just said, that
mm,
that's where cars are going through, and lease companies tend to be pushing their cars through those as
mhm,
well. Um, but yeah, equally love buying from platforms like Motorway and
mm.
CarWow, because again, you've got that human element and you can talk to people and understand what worked about the car, what didn't work about the car. So yeah, I really enjoy that. And actually, when I'm selling to people as well, they quite like to understand where the car has come from. And just so it came out of a lease from a lease company is, yeah, it's a bit dull. Yeah, and so I do buy a lot from those platforms. I like those platforms. I am now buying from some of the lease company platforms that have been set up, like One Link,
Mhm.
and Dealer Auction actually are
Yep.
doing a lot of stuff on that front. So that's really helpful. And we do buy from there as well. It's a real mix and match. And I guess because back in 2017, electric cars were difficult to find,
Mm,
we spent a lot of time hunting and you'd have to
yeah.
go, anywhere and everywhere and all sorts to buy. And so we don't balk at that. And we still
Yeah.
have that in our DNA, I guess. So, and then also what's lovely for us is, yeah, getting part exchanges as well. Either, we sold to customers. Some customers are on their third car from us. They bought some little 22 kilowatt battery and
Yep.
then they upgraded that. And now what we're seeing is people coming back and buying their main family car. They're so confident with electric now that they're going fully electric in the household with perhaps two electric cars in their homes. So I do get part exchanges through that, which
Mm,
that's nice
yeah.
as well. Um, but
What,
yeah,
what
I
about
mean,
what
yeah.
about reconditioning? I'm thinking that all the technicians with manufacturers that go away with all the courses, you've got the master tech. They know all about the amount of space they need to leave around it and replacing the battery and how dangerous it is. In the independent world there, did you find it hard for reconditioning to find technicians to work on electric vehicles now? You must have gone through that pain barrier because is there enough independent specialists who can work on the electric vehicles?
So definitely a shortage. And
Mm.
actually, a lot of the cars that I'm selling are still on HV battery warranties from the
Mhm.
main dealers.
Okay.
And the main dealers do not have enough
Oh,
HV
yes.
technicians
Oh,
in
tell
their
us about it.
network.
It's
So
so
if
much.
you, yeah, and if you've got a warranty repair, you really want that done by the main dealer. And you
Mm,
don't want to bypass that, and you have to wait sometimes, which is annoying and stressful.
mm.
But having said that, we are also selling some cars now that are coming out of battery warranty.
Yep.
I mean, we're not really seeing huge amounts of battery failures, if I'm honest.
Hmm.
So, and a lot of the stuff on the car can be worked on by a
Yep.
normal technician. So, suspension components. But I mean, I suppose the most common thing is for the air conditioning system, so the compressor or whatever, to fail. And that is part of the HV drivetrain.
Yep.
It's then often not covered under the manufacturer's HV battery warranty because it's not the battery that's failed. It's something to do with the cabin air
Hmm.
system. And yeah, finding technicians who can work on those. I mean, they are all busy people who can
Oh,
pick and choose what they do. But having said that, we've got a couple of fabulous people that we work with who are real specialists, and we've been working with for quite a few years now. And yeah, and they're good, and they don't
I,
get grubby when they're working because it's all
yeah,
all
that's tr-
clean. Lots of
that's true.
software.
That's true. It's again, I'm motor trade from 17, and I started in the workshops there, and it was grease everywhere. Now it's a laptop.
Mhm.
Okay, it really is a different world there. But as an industry, getting technicians, we just have really struggled. There's any dealer listening to this is groaning at the moment because that really is such an issue. Now, listen, with EV vehicles, okay, the Chinese are, I was going to say, coming. No, the Chinese are here. Okay, MG is just paid a huge dividend. The number of cars they were selling is going from strength to strength. You've got there's so many offers coming out with the Chinese that you can't keep up with all of them there, and they're driving a price down on the entry level to EVs. Is that going to have a knock-on effect on the traditional, the Fords, the Volkswagens, and so forth? Are they going to eat into that share? And the reason why I ask that is driving an electric vehicle is sometimes, if you can jump into the MG, you can go and jump into Porsche Taycan, you can go and jump into electric motors, electric motor, a battery's a battery. I suppose what I'm asking, what impact are the Chinese going to have on the market?
Well, that $1 million question. I
It
don't
is,
have a
isn't it?
crystal ball, but I can talk about our thoughts and what we're seeing. So they are coming in with things that are cheaper, but and that's great because it opens it up to more consumers, and it's also great because it will push the traditional manufacturers to be really efficient and cost effective in the way they're producing their cars. But just like, I don't know, I was thinking about this last night, in preparation for today. I mean, I guess there are 3-star hotels and there are 5-star hotels, and there's a place in the market for 3-star hotels, and there's a place in the market for 5-star hotels. And it's just no different with cars, because if you and if you want a 5-star, then you're going to go for something that's from a traditional manufacturer and is really well thought through and has beautiful finishes and enhanced sound systems, has software that has been through so much testing that the car's not going to beep at you every 5 seconds. Cars that have been developed for UK roads. I mean, this is one of the things that I hear a lot of criticism. Tesla faced a lot of criticism actually in the early years because their driver assistance systems were just bleeping a lot and reacting, if you like. Now, I don't think they were overreacting if you were driving on American roads, because that's where the developers were developing. And then they brought out a big sort of software update for the UK cars, and that made a big difference. So manufacturers that are used to UK style of driving and have developed their software accordingly, they have amazing products. But equally, that's not for everyone. Not everyone wants that. Not everyone, even people who could perhaps afford a Porsche, might not actually want to spend the money on a car. They might want to spend money on other things in their life. It's not necessarily better, and it doesn't necessarily follow that if you can afford it, that you want to. So there will always be a place for different price points and different different models and different vehicles. And so, from a consumer and a consumer championing point of view, I welcome the entry of new producers.
Well, you look at B1.
But can I just say, the one thing that isn't great from a consumer point of view is that these cars are coming into the UK without a network that can support them, and without a full set of manuals in English that means that the technicians can easily diagnose what's wrong with your car, work out what it needs, and repair it in a quick way, and without established logistic paths for parts. And so whilst the car might be great, inevitably at some point, it's a car, they all go wrong at some point in their lives. You need support. You need to be able to take it in, and this is where some of those established manufacturers and those that are based in Europe really are amazing, because you take the car in and they can decide today, maybe tomorrow, what's wrong with it, and then the part for it is here perhaps the next day, and you're back on the road. Whereas what we're hearing from some of the from those Chinese manufacturers is that there's a shortage of technicians working on them. You might have to go a long way to get to a service center. It may take them ages to get the parts. The part that they fit might then not fix the problem, and as they get more established in the UK, then they'll get there. Absolutely, they'll get there.
I I suppose BYD is one of the biggest manufacturer electric vehicles now, overtook Tesla. I think it was quite funny that Elon Musk 10 years ago was asked about BYD and he laughed. He said, have you seen their cars? Look how ugly they are. Maybe not the smartest thing that he said at the time, because BYD is definitely going strength to strength. MG in the UK. But I suppose even Tesla, when they first come in, there were problems to start with the a dealer network out there. And I think very, very quickly that's changing. It's be interesting to see with the tariffs. Now, we know that Europe is putting tariffs on the Chinese specifically electric vehicles. We don't know what's going to happen with the election in America, but the man out there said he's talking about 400% tariffs on electric vehicles. I understand the UK has come out and said, we're not going to put tariffs on Chinese electric vehicles. I just don't know if tariffs is the right thing to put on these cars coming in. I just think it's...
Yeah, I agree with you, and I am concerned, particularly from a consumer perspective, on whether that's going to lead to poor behaviours or poor products on markets that. Yeah,
we're going to get political here, but I think tariffs always make someone weak. Okay, you put tariffs on, someone doesn't have to try as hard. They don't have to develop as hard. It's a protected market. That we're getting very political now here, Estelle. But
yeah, exactly.
And listen, we don't know who's going to win the election in America, but I know tariffs are definitely full steam ahead for Europe on Chinese specific and different levels. But I understand.
I think it will probably just have a bit of a short-term effect. I don't know. Again, call me cynical, but I think they just find ways around it, so all of a sudden, well, I mean, maybe this is a positive, because maybe what it's going to push those Chinese manufacturers to do is to open plants that either assemble or do a sufficient enough work in Europe or whatever, in the territory in which they do not want to have tariffs imposed on, in order to be able to classify the car as, from that territory. So maybe, I don't know, I'm not a political person, but, maybe they will, stimulate a whole bunch of different behaviors from different people and have consequences that, may also have some positives out of them as well. But that doesn't mean, I'm not saying that I'm supporting the introduction of tariffs, but I'm just saying that, I noticed, for example, that like Polestar is a Chinese car, although Swedish engineered, and they still have a lot of R&D development and engineering functions in Scandinavia, and certainly the Polestars that we were selling, that I was coming in a couple of years ago, their VINs were indicating that they were Chinese cars, Chinese made, and that hasn't changed in terms of where these cars are made and assembled, but their VINs on the newer ones coming in are European VINs. So
it's quite funny too. The Teslas, I'm going back a while now. The Chinese Teslas were actually built quite well compared to the American ones.
I would have a Chinese Tesla over an American one.
Yep.
Oh my God, all day long. Yeah, I mean, a lot of these cars are coming from really established Chinese car manufacturers. They're not new manufacturers.
No, not at all. They're new to us. We're just new to us. I'd never heard of some of these brands, but of course they're massive. But just new to me, like Great Wall. You think, who is Great Wall? Who is Build Your Dream? It sounds just quite funny, doesn't it? But it's big manufacturers. So I want to ask about the future of electric vehicles. Okay, is it sustainable? Lots of people talk about battery production and can we keep producing these batteries? The environmental impact on producing the batteries. Okay, that's got a big concern. Is it sustainable? Are we going to go biofuels? Is it going to be hydrogen? I want to get your views as can electricity take us where we need to as a planet?
Well, I think
again, people just listening to this, I can see the look on Estelle's face all the time there. You're going to say, wow, I love this.
obviously I don't have the answers, but I'm
Mm,
just going to give you our thoughts
yeah.
and our understanding. We are not battery scientists. We're not
Mm.
scientists at all.
Both, I'm definitely not.
Used car salespeople.
Yes.
So let's remember that.
Yes.
But so just going back to basics, let's think about electricity. Electricity is widely available. It's easily transportable down just wires all around the country. It's already there. It's already established. It's very easy to tap into it. Hydrogen is not, and hydrogen would need to be transported. It's
Compressed.
yes.
Compressed. Yes.
So for it to be a domestic solution, quite frankly, it seems a bit like going backwards because you're going to have to go somewhere to fill up with your hydrogen car. Whereas with a lithium ion battery, you can just plug it in at home and charge it up overnight, where we all know there's quite a bit of surplus electricity in the UK, and I think that will continue, particularly as we move into renewables. It seems to be windier at night than during the day, and those wind turbines are turning. Let's use that electricity
Yep.
when that's happening. So I think from that point of view, electricity, lithium ion batteries that are fueled by electricity really makes sense for consumers and just cars. For long commercial vehicles and heavy goods traffic, I don't think, my personal view is that should move to hydrogen. And those hubs where those heavy goods vehicles fill up and go out, they can have hydrogen making centers there so that they're not having to transport it. They can actually make it happen. But the problem that we've got with hydrogen right now is that it takes more electricity for every kilowatt you get out of hydrogen than from that you can get from a lithium ion battery in an electric car. So so I can't see in the next sort of 10 to 15 years for the average man and woman on the Peckham omnibus, there is going to be an electric car. But in 30 years time, are we going to be driving around? There probably will be electric cars, but will they be fueled by a lithium ion battery? I suspect technology will absolutely move on. And the other thing I would say is that I know that in terms of battery chemistry, there are strides being made all the time. And what they're trying to do, and they are achieving, is to have sort of synthetic sources of some of the chemical elements in there so that they don't have to come from our planet, so that they are more sustainably produced. For example, we've already got batteries widely available that don't have cobalt in them. So
I didn't realize that, because that cobalt was the one that really worried me about stripping forests and so forth. So now there's lithium ion that doesn't need cobalt. Is that right?
Yes, there are.
Wow.
That's my understanding. Again, I am not a battery
No, me neither. But
I have met them on my journeys, and that's
great news. Because again, I love the idea of electricity for the environment. I really do. But I was worried about the destruction to get some of these materials they needed.
And I think to be fair, that there are battery manufacturers who are also worried about that. I mean, it can be easy to do from a reputation point of view. You're on a knife edge all the time, but also it's not cheap and easy to produce when you've got to go to those lengths. So there are going to be commercial drivers for doing it better and more in a way that's more environmentally friendly. And I know that they're working as hard on that as they are on getting them as efficient as possible and as much range as possible.
That's it. So listen, someone listening to this, what advice do you have to the salesperson, the sales manager that comes in? What advice do you have them for dealing with a customer? Are the customers, I was going to say, are they different? You might not know because you've always dealt with electric customers. Okay, but what advice would you have for that salesperson about how to deal with the first-time electric customer?
Well, I would say you need patience and good listening skills. So someone told me the other day that the average time between inquiry and purchase of a petrol secondhand car is 72 hours. That's the average time that people make the decision whether to buy a petrol car or not in the second-hand market, and that is you're looking sort of 3 weeks at least for
3 months sometimes, I'm sure.
or more. I mean, so I have customers who first came to me 6 months ago, even 12 months ago. I mean, quite often people make a switch because of an event. Quite often it's an MOT failure, and then they want me to take their MOT pile of something as
Yeah. Thank you for that.
yeah. So but yeah, so you do have to approach it that you're not the chances of you selling the car this week when they've come in for the first time that you've met them or spoken to them or whatever are less than 50%, I would say. And so therefore you need to have systems in place to be able to keep in touch with them, keep that rolling. And ultimately, if you're good at that, then you will be rewarded with the sale in the end.
Isn't the sale so much holding hands? It starts off with do I really have to charge at night? Do I have to go out my dressing gown and take it out of the plug out at night time when I do that? No, the app can do that for you. What charger do I get? And it's so many times, it's all those conversations before you talk about the car.
Yeah.
It is.
I think that's perhaps and I guess that's something that doesn't immediately occur to me because I didn't come from motor trade before. But I think just talking to customers on how they're moaning about other experiences they've had in other places, I think that's the thing, is that everyone wants the conversation to be around the car because nobody talks about petrol, where you're going to get it from. But actually, a whole chunk of the conversation has to be around range.
We car dealers, okay, we would never say, okay, so what you're going to do is first you get this petrol pump and you take the green one out, and what you do is you pick it up and you put it in this little door, okay, and then what you do is you pull the little handle up and nothing happens, so you have to wave at the window to some on his phone to allow you to put petrol in it. We don't do that because it's taken for granted. But the first time EV, people want to know things like, do I have to go out in the middle of the night? How do I charge it at night time? What happens if it's on the side of the road? And some of the things customers say, what if someone just unplugs the power and goes off and starts charging their car? All the stuff that you're smiling now because you take it for granted, but that's where the conversation starts with first-time adopters, early adopters, I suppose.
Yes. Yeah, early majority. And when we had early adopters, they tended to be people who were, said a bit techie. And so they would have done their own research. They were in that mindset. That's how they operate about everything that they buy, and, probably if you're trying to sell them baked beans, they would have researched it and be able to tell you the chemical.
So Martin's the early adopter, is he? You said that before. Yes.
But the early majority, they don't really want to do all that research. That's not necessarily how they operate. That's not how they buy things. They need someone to just explain it to them in simple terms, give them the confidence that they can do it, and then they'll start going, okay, well, I've got a dog crate that needs to go in the back.
Yeah, that's it. That's so true, isn't it? Estelle, I was just thinking though, end of life of these vehicles. Okay, so normally we deal with franchise dealerships, so they buy the car new, the first cycle is 3 to 4 years down the track, then there's a second, maybe a third cycle. Is there a real issue with the breakers of these electric vehicles? Is it going to be a real issue with the chemicals in these batteries getting into streams and the environment?
Well, I mean, the same way as petrol and diesel breakers are licensed to operate, I'm sure it'd be the same, and they'll have regulations and requirements around how they dispose of things. But there are now a couple of EV breakers working in the UK, and I'm sure they're doing a roaring trade because there aren't many of them. You have to remember that batteries are modular, so you can break them down into the different cells. And the other thing I'm seeing is these EV specialists, of which there are much more than EV breakers, but EV specialists, they are also taking batteries and able to recondition them and then put them back together and then perhaps back into a different vehicle. So I mean, obviously it's still a bit early days from that point of view, because the first EVs that we had were 2010 with the Mitsubishi i-MiEV, and then into 2011
Sorry, the Mitsubishi. I missed that. I thought the Leaf was the first one. Mitsubishi. Yeah.
Mitsubishi i-MiEV, also available as a Citroen C0, I think it was called, and the Peugeot Ion. So a little four-seater, very narrow, but it's a strange little thing, but really actually for short journeys. Small battery, sort of 30-40 minutes of range now. But it's the experiences with those which people are now starting to have, because they're getting to 15 years old. But it's early days, isn't it, for braking?
It is 2000. I suppose the Leaf 2011. It shocks you, actually. It isn't that long ago, really. And look what's happened. Even like old classic cars. I see the other day that old Jaguars and old Porsches, they're putting Tesla powertrains in and so forth. And it's amazing. Lots of different things are happening around the EV world.
And it's going to be interesting to see which of these generation are going to be like the iconic sort of classics of the future. I don't think it will be the Mitsubishi i-MiEV personally. Right. I do wonder about the BMW i3. I mean, they were so iconic. And I feel mean, because obviously Nissan, that early Nissan Leaf with the sort of look, which you either loved or hated.
You loved it because you had one.
I did. But ultimately the BMW i3 was really pioneering as well, and iconic in its looks. And even now, they're not making them anymore, but even now they stay on my forecourt for such a short period of time whenever I'm getting them in. They are still really popular.
I love your website where you've got all your team and what Martin likes to drive. He's in the Polestar because he likes that. What you like to drive, okay? I love how you've got your team there, and it's that personal side of it as well, which is really good. Estelle, listen, I've really enjoyed that. How do people find you? So if someone wants you to, you want some Estelle to buy some cars from you, you've got some trade-ins coming through there. What's the easiest way for people to reach out and find you?
Well, always call, obviously. I love talking to people, but
EV Experts, just go to EV Experts online. Is that the easiest way?
Just go to our website. So go to our website. Our phone number obviously is there, but also if you want to just sort of if you want to submit sell my EV and just list there what it is, and then say we've got a form that you can fill in, name, email address, phone number, what the car is, and then if you just put in the car description, a time that's good for you, for one of us to come back to you with an underwrite or with help or whatever, then we'll do that.
Absolutely brilliant, Estelle. Really appreciate that. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
That just leaves me to say that all details of this episode and other episodes on the selling in the motor trade can be found on our website, simcotraining.co.uk. Go there to get a copy of our book, Words That Sell Cars. Go there to sign up to a free trial of our Sales Fitness online sales training program. Easiest way to get hold of me is Simon Bowkett through LinkedIn. Thank you.